In this video, we are going to solve a problem where you have to factor a quadratic using the factor mode. So we have this quadratic, 8x squared minus 10x minus 3. Our first step in factoring is to identify a, b, and c. So a equals 8, that's the coefficient of x squared. b equals negative 10, that's the coefficient of x. And c is the constant, negative 3. Now, because a is not 1, we can't use big X. So we're going to use what I call factor mode. Circle surrounded by a square. And we're going to put like a sail on it, which is why I call it factor mode. So diagonally in the square, we are going to write the original quadratic trinomial. So 8x squared minus 10x and then minus 3. Then up here, we're going to write a times c. In our case, that's 8 times negative 3, which is negative 24. So now, to fill these two boxes, we're looking to split this negative 10x up into two numbers whose product is negative 24 and whose sum is negative 10x. So you can pause the video and see if you can think of what those two numbers are. Those two numbers are negative 12 and 2. So this is negative 12x. This is 2x. An important thing to notice is all we've done is we've rewritten this negative 10x in a different way. It's now negative 12 plus 2 equals negative 10. And I did put x's on these because what we're doing here is we're actually doing the reverse of box multiplication. We started with the trinomial and we're trying to get into linear binomials. So now we factor out of the box. We look for the greatest common factor between 8x squared and 2x. That factor is 2x, because 8x squared can be divided by 2x, and 2x can be divided by 2x. Now we go this way. Greatest common factor between 8x squared and negative 12x is 4x. And we take the sign that's closest to the edge of the box. So then 2x and negative 3, they don't have any common factors, so we're going to do plus 1. And then negative 12x and negative 3, they have in common negative 3. Now I want you to notice that if I had box multiplied this, I would have gotten these answers because 4x times 2x is 8x squared. 1 times 2x is 2x. 4x times negative 3 is negative 12x. Negative 3 times positive 1 is negative 3. And then these are our binomial factors now. So my factors are 4x plus 1 and 2x minus 3. You can check your work by distributing. So 4x times 2x is 8x squared. 4x times negative 3 is negative 12x. 1 times 2x is positive 2x. 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. Combine the middle x terms, and I get 8x squared minus 10x minus 3, which is what I started with. Let's do a second example. A second example, we'll start with 15x squared minus 10x. I'm sorry, let's make that 15x squared minus 13x plus 2. Just ignore that. So here we have a equals 15, b equals negative 13, c equals 2. A does not equal 1, so big X won't work. We'll draw our factor mode. And diagonally here, you put the original trinomial. So 15x squared minus 13x plus 2. And up here we put a times c, which is 15 times 2, which is 30. So we want numbers that have a product of 30 and a sum of negative 13x. So because this sum is a negative and the product is positive, the signs here must be negative, negative. And I'll give you a second to think of what two numbers those might be. Negative 10x and negative 3x. Because negative 3x plus negative 10x equals negative 13x. And negative 10 times negative 3 equals 30. So now we want to divide out of the box. This is the opposite of box multiplication. We're looking for the greatest common factors. The greatest common factor between 15x squared and 10x is 5x. Because both the terms are divisible by 5, both terms are divisible by x. Let's look this way, 15x squared and 3x. Both terms are divisible by 3x. And we're going to have both of these be positive because the 15 is positive. Let's look over here, negative 3x and 2. The only common factor is 1. And the little rule with this says that you take the sign that's closest to the edge of the box. So we will use a negative 1 here. And notice that this 10 is negative, so we're going to have a negative here. So negative 10x and 2 actually have a 2 in common. So I found my factors. They are 5x minus 1 and 3x minus 2. I should always check my work by distributing. So 5x times 3x is 15x squared. 5x times negative 2 is negative 10x. Negative 1 times 3x is negative 3x. And negative 1 times negative 2 is positive 2. Combined my middle terms, I get 15x squared minus 13x plus 2, which is exactly what I started with. So these factors are my answer. Looks like we have time to do one more. So let's do trinomial 6x squared plus 13x minus 15. So here we have a equals 6, b equals 13, c equals negative 15. Since a does not equal 1, the big X won't work. We're going to use the factor vote. Draw that right now. And diagonally in the boat, you write your original trinomial. And up here is a times c, 6 times negative 15. Remember, if you don't know, then do the math. And that's negative 90. So now we're looking for a product of negative 90 and a sum of positive 13. And you might not know that off your head. So let's think about what we can do to make this work. One thing you can do is take negative 90 and use a factor tree. So negative 90, or we'll just do 90, okay? I know that that's 2 times 45. 45 splits into 5 times 9, and 9 splits into 3 times 3. So my prime factors are 2 times 5 times 3 times 3. So I'm going to write those here so I remember that. 2 times 5 times 3 times 3. If I multiply all these numbers, I get 90. Okay, I need them to add up to be positive 13. So I must have a positive and a negative. And my positive must be bigger because I end up with a positive sum. So let's see, could it possibly be negative 1 times 90? That's a product, but it's not going to get us a sum of 13. Could it possibly be negative 2 times 45? Well, that equals negative 90, but it's not going to give me a sum of positive 13. What about negative 3? 3 times what? Well, 3 times 5 times 2 times 3. 5 times 2 is 10, times 3 is 30. So it must be 30 times 3. Well, that equals negative 90, but the sum isn't 13. What about 4? If I look at these factors, there's no way to get a 4 from these factors, so I can ignore 4. What about 5? Well, 5 times 2 times 3 times 3. So 2 times 3 is 6, times 3 is 18. What about negative 5 times 18? Well, that equals negative 90, and if I add negative 5 plus 18, oops, I gave it away, plus 18, my sum is 13. So I just found my numbers. So the 18 has to be the positive factor, and the 5 needs to be the negative factor for me to get a sum of positive 13. So now let's factor out. Let's see, what does 6x squared and 18x have in common? It would have 6x in common because 6x squared can be divided by 6x and 18x can be divided by 6x. What about 6x squared and negative 5x? Really, all they have in common is an x, right, or a 1x. What about negative 5x and negative 15? Negative 5. And we take this negative and put it here. What about 18x and negative 15? It's going to be 3. Let's just do a check. Is 6x times x 6x squared? Yep. Is 6x times 3 18x? We got that. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. Let me see, I lost track. 6x times 3 is 18x. And 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. Got it. So my factors are 6x minus 5, x plus 3. I should always check by distributing, so let's do that. 6 times x is 6x squared. 6x times 3 is 18x. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. And negative 5 times 3 is negative 15. You can always combine the middle two terms. 6x squared plus 13x minus 15. That's what we started with. So our factors are just what we thought they were. 6x minus 5 and x plus 3.